Today we will be painting a lush green forest with a beautiful pathway. So grab your brushes and let us capture the serenity of the forest along the way. Alright, let us begin our third project. I'm gonna tape down the paper nicely on all the sides and make sure you have tightly sealed it. Once you have taped down the paper, run your finger over the edges to make sure it is tightly sealed. Okay, so now let us mark the composition of the painting. I'm simply marking the rough skeleton of the painting. So somewhere from the mid area, we have this pathway coming towards the foreground. Draw two curved and wobbly lines suggesting the pathway. And on either side of this pathway, we will reserve some space for the muddy area. And rest of the elements we will add using the paints. So I'm not drawing anything as of now. Alright, so let us begin by wetting the paper. We will go with wet on wet technique for the base layers. I'm using a water spray bottle here. You could also use a larger brush. Now to spread the water evenly, I'm using a mop brush. Use any brush of your choice. So I'm running my brush vertically and horizontally, making sure the water is spread equally on the paper. This will help us ensure there are no water puddles on the paper. Alright, now let's mix the color. I'm using Payne's Grey and Indigo in equal proportion. So the paint and water consistency is 1:1, like 50% of water and 50% of paint. So with this, I'll paint the pathway. Now for the muddy area on the sides, I'll be mixing raw umber and burnt umber together. You could go with any brown color that you already have with you. Doesn't have to be the exact same shade. Apply this on either side of this pathway. So the initial layer of the pathway is done. We will leave it here and move on to paint the forest. I'm gonna mix the colors required. So here I am mixing sap green and yellow to form a lighter green color. I'll also add a bit of orange to make it more warmer. Okay, wait. Before we paint the forest part, we need to have a sky in our painting. So I'm going to do that using a diluted ultramarine blue color. Take small amount of ultramarine blue and add loads of water to it to make it diluted. We will paint this in a minimal form. So I'm applying some paints, leaving some white spaces in between. If you want, you can paint it darker as well, but I would prefer keeping it light. Now let's go back to the green color that we mixed earlier. So with this, I'll start by painting some mid-sized trees around the mid-ground area. I'm painting a kind of a pine tree shapes here with zigzaggy brush strokes. Leave some blank space between the trees. Just roughly paint the trees. Don't worry about achieving perfection. Since this is the initial layer, it is going to spread and create blurry effect. So next I'm mixing orange to this green color and it will form an orangish green color. We will have these orange trees in between. So I want a sense of variation here in the trees. So for some trees it is green, and for some it is orangish, or like brownish green. So you have to paint these trees on either side of the pathway. So this will suggest the pathway going through the forest. I'll add the colors to cover up the blank area in the foreground. So far this was the initial wash, which will depict the lighter colors in the painting. Now on this same wet surface I'm going to add darker colors to add depth and dimension in the painting. Next, let us intensify the pathway. So I'm mixing Payne's grey and indigo again in darker tone, and we'll be adding that on the boundaries of the pathway. And on the either side I'll add this brown color. So this has enhanced the depth and made the pathway more captivating. Next we are going to paint the darker layers for the forest. So I want you to mix the darker colors in advance. So I'll use this existing darker grey mix and add burnt sienna and sap green to the same color. This will make a darker green color. So we'll mix these and form a very darker green color. I'm not applying it now, but keeping the colors ready will help us paint quickly. Okay, that was one color. Next we'll take sap green and yellow, mix it together. We will use this as lighter green color for the foliage part. So with this color mix I'll be painting the partially visible foliage on the top part, on the upper frame of the painting. So simply paint some random leaf-like shape. Collectively they'll look as the foliage. Simply add these zigzaggy brush strokes or some curved lines. Don't fully cover it up, leave some spaces in between. Alright, let's do it on the other side as well. I'm roughly marking these brush strokes depicting the foliage. Now for the mid-ground trees here, I'm going to add the mid-tone colors. So this is slightly darker green color when compared to the previous layer. So in a landscape, for anything to create a sense of harmony, you should have different tonal values like lighter tones, mid-tones and darker tones. Then it will make our painting complete. I'm also adding a mix of orange and green brush strokes. This will suggest some orange trees in the picture. Also notice that the height of the tree decreases as we move towards the midground and the background area. The foreground trees are taller. That will create a sense of aerial perspective and a sense of distance in the painting. Suppose I had painted the trees in same height, then it would have appeared flat and you wouldn't feel the difference in the landscape. Okay, so far we have painted the lighter tones, the mid tones. Now we will add the darker tones in the painting. I'm roughly marking these brush strokes here depicting the tree shape. Just remember the pine tree shape and think that you're only painting some parts of it, not entire tree. Also, I'm making sure the background color is visible here. Do not completely block the background colors. Let them show through these blank spaces. taking some time to mix some more darker green color. That's why it is really helpful to mix more colors in advance. Also remember, this is dry on wet technique here at this point. Initial layer was wet on wet. Now on the top part, I'll be adding the darker foliage. Don't fully cover it up, leave some lighter green areas as well. And for the mid-ground trees, I'll partly apply the brush strokes, making the other parts of the trees visible. That way we will make the tree look fuller and complete, depicting the shadow and the highlight parts. One side of the tree will suggest the lighter part, other side will suggest the darker side. So when I reach the bottom part of this forest area, I am painting darker colors. Usually the bottom areas will lack the sunlight, so I am painting it darker here. You see this sharp area here? I'll take a damp brush and run my brush along this line. This will soften this hard edge that was being formed. And on the sides, I'm applying some random lines suggesting the foliage. So on the outer ends of the foliage, I'll add simple tiny lines. There are chances that you might over apply these darker brush strokes, so be careful. Here my intention was to leave some lighter green areas in between these trees, yet have these darker foliage. Next, I'll add burnt umber along the pathway. Around the boundaries of this forest area. Next, I'm going to mix mid-tone green color. So I'm taking yellow, green and burnt sienna. Use mid-tone colors to create a smoother transition from lighter to darker color. We don't want the sharp change in colors. So with this color, I am applying some mid-tone values on the foliage and the leaves here. Adding some more random foliage in between empty areas here. Next, I'll take a damp brush, clean damp brush and a napkin. Lift the colors from the mid area. If your paper has already dried, then leave it as it is. It will create a highlight on the pathway and also create a sense of direction towards the forest area. Now towards the foreground, I'm going to add darker colors. You could use Payne's grey and black for this. So when you add darker color to a particular area, the lighter colors around that area will automatically get highlighted. Next, I'm taking a mix of Payne's grey and burnt umber and splattering the paints around the pathway. Here on the left side, I feel I need to add some darker leaves. So you can always step back and see if your painting is lacking something. So now is the time to make some corrections if you want. Try to observe your painting from a distant area and see if it needs any correction. So next, before allowing it to completely dry, I'm gonna sprinkle some water using my water spray bottle and leave it to dry fully. So what happens here is it will create some tiny water droplets like effect once it dries. So this is optional step. You can do it or skip it. It's up to you. You will still get a beautiful background even if you don't sprinkle water on it. Alright, so let's allow the paints to dry. Alright, the paper has dried and this is how it looks once it dries. So in watercolors, the colors tend to appear slightly faded after drying, but that's okay. Okay, so let's continue. I'm going to paint the tree trunks. So I have mixed burnt umber and black. You could mix any darker color. Notice my hand movement here. I'm trying to create a wobbly appearance in the tree trunk. Here, just blending the bottom part using my fingertip. Let us paint another tree trunk in the foreground area. Again doing it with wobbly brush strokes, creating a natural pattern in the trunk of the tree. So here I have forked the tree into multiple parts. So I'm mixing the same color again. Next, painting another tree on the left side. Blend its bottom using the fingertip or a tissue paper. Just remember, when you're painting the trees in the foreground area, the trunk should be thicker in size and the trees in the midground area will be comparatively thinner and smaller. Next, I'm going to draw a tree that is much closer to the viewpoint. So I'm going to make this tree partially exposed to sunlight. A part of this tree will have sunlit appearance. So I'm going to paint that with the brown color. I'm using burnt umber for the same. Lifting some extra paint using a damp brush so that it has a transparent effect in the brown areas. So do you see this transparent effect already, which gives us sunlit appearance in the painting? So I'm gonna add some more branches. You can fork them as many times you want. Adding these little touches brings a sense of life to our painting. Trying to define the shape of the trees. So these trees we are painting using wet on dry technique because we need hard edges. These hard edges will define the shape of the trees. Adding some branches. There is no fixed point for adding these branches. You can fork them anywhere you want. The only thing we need to remember is to make them look organic. Now to depict a sense of distance and create an aerial perspective, I am adding some smaller tree trunks around the mid-ground area. So you may not have achieved completely same result as mine for the background area. So you can see where your trees are and then add these trunk and the branches. So in the foreground, I'll be filling in the area by painting some tiny trees. Carefully apply some random lines in between. We need to make this area look fuller. Further extending the above branches to make the trees look fuller. Next I'll take slightly darker green color, and with that I'll be adding some grass blades in the foreground area. So this area is closer to the viewpoint, so we can see the tiny details here, right? That's why I'm adding these lines and some grass shapes. And around the mid-ground area I'll be adding smaller details. The same rule applies for the foliage part as well. Since it is closer to the viewpoint, we would be able to see the leaves and the foliage. So I'm gonna take darker green color and dab my brush to create the shape of the foliage. You could also use an old brush or a thicker fan brush or something like that and cover it up with the foliage, or you could individually paint the leaves. It's up to you. Next I'll be using my fan brush to make the process easier. We are not trying to fully cover the area, just random brush strokes to suggest the leaves. And on the corner I'm gonna add a darker green color, which is sap green mixed with black. So here I'll be adding some leaves using mid green color. So this is partially sunlit area, right? So we need to paint it with lighter green color. So I'll be adding some more branches here. You can fork them into as many parts you want. Next, I'm going to cover the upper area of the painting with a rough paper and splatter some darker paints on the muddy pathway. This will add a sense of texture on the ground. Okay, so we are almost done. Now I'm going to do some corrections. So I'll take black and make the tree trunks darker. I felt that some tree trunks were appearing lighter, so I'm kind of adding this darker color. Also, I'll be adding some extra tree trunks in the background area. So take your time and analyze your artwork. See if it is missing anything. Okay, now let us add some birds using a fine liner brush. Alright, we are done with this artwork. Let us remove the masking tape and reveal the final appearance. Gently peel off the masking tape. Please don't end up tearing the paper. There you go. This is how our painting looks like. I hope you enjoyed and had a fun learning session today. Please do share your class project under the projects gallery. I would really love to see your recreation. And please feel free to ask your doubts and questions regarding this class. Alright, so I will see you in the next chapter.